Tomatoes! Probably one of the most anticipated vegetables in the garden. And when the harvest starts, they come fast and furious. So it's really easy to really quickly have more than you could possibly eat and use in favorite recipes. So that's why it's nice to preserve some for winter eating. Many people can their tomatoes, which I think is way too much work and it's not necessary. And the other thing people do is they take off the skins and remove the seeds so that they can get it like the consistency of grocery store tomato sauce. I would encourage you to just eat the skins and the seeds. It's totally worth it for the time and energy that you're going to save, and you actually barely even notice them. The easiest option is just to freeze the tomatoes whole in bags, but because tomatoes have a lot of water in them, mostly what you'll be freezing is water. And it also takes up a lot of room. But if you have not a lot of time and you have a lot of freezer space, this could be the option for you. The second option is to chop them up and just freeze them raw in containers. So again, you're still going to be freezing a lot of water, but you could try to drain some of it off in a colander. So once in a while, I use this method when I don't have enough time to cook down the tomatoes, and you'll be able to fit a little bit more in the same space than if you freeze them whole. My favorite way to preserve tomatoes is to try to cook some of the water off before I freeze them. This allows me to fit a lot more tomatoes into the same amount of space. So I'm going to walk you through the method that I use. First step is to rinse and drain your tomatoes if they're dirty and they need a little wash. Then you want to chop the tomatoes. I usually just cut off the top. I don't bother coring them. And then I use pretty much any tomato I have. I often mix paste and slicers and reds and oranges and yellows all into the same batch. You can cook them down in any kind of pot that you might have. One with a thick bottom is good because it'll be less likely to burn. So to speed up the process, I use a flat steam table pan that I got from my local restaurant supply store. I place it over two of the stove burners so it cooks down the sauce in double time. So there's not really any exact time that you need to cook the tomatoes down for. It kind of depends on how many you start with in the pan and what the end consistency you're looking for is. So I let it cook down until it looks more like sauce than raw tomatoes, usually about 2 hours. When you get it to a consistency you like, you can turn off the stove and let it cool. Then once it's cool, you can transfer it to your containers. I often use old yogurt containers that I've saved throughout the year. So how do I use my frozen tomatoes? Basically, in any recipe that calls for canned tomatoes, whole, diced, chopped, etc., I just defrost a yogurt container and throw it in the recipe. You can also use your cooked down tomatoes as a base for tomato sauce. So I'll just get some onions and garlic from my basement, chop them up, saute them in a pan, add a couple containers of my cooked down tomatoes, and then cook it down a little bit more into some kind of sauce consistency. Then put some oregano or basil or something else in there, and then we'll eat it over pasta or with veggies. If you want, you can also add green beans or fresh oregano, fresh basil, anything else from your garden into your cooked down tomatoes if you want to spice it up a little bit. But I would process those things separately and then add them to the sauce right before you freeze them, just to make sure that you don't overcook them since you're going to cook down the tomatoes for quite a while. All right, have fun with your tomato harvest and post some pictures in the Facebook group and share how are you preserving your tomatoes this summer. If you think preserving food is difficult and takes up a lot of time, I have good news. There are lots of simple and quick methods you can use to get your extra harvest into storage so that you can be putting those ingredients into delicious meals in the off season. My book, Super Easy Food Preserving, is available as an ebook or a print book, and you can read all about it in the link below this video. Happy preserving!